Hi, Chris Moser here from AOPA. So today we're going to be talking about in-flight fires. Luckily, they're relatively rare, but it's always good to practice to make sure that you're good to go. So get out that emergency checklist and let's go get ready to do an engine fire in flight.
AOPA keeps flying safe, accessible, and fun by protecting your freedom to fly. We are the most trusted one-stop resource for all things related to general aviation. Become an AOPA pilot today. This video is created in partnership with the Air Safety Institute.
So let's practice our engine fire in flight procedure. And of course, the first thing we want to do is what would be possible indications of getting a fire an engine fire in flight? What might we see? Well, on the first side, we might see fluctuating fuel indications. So we want to make sure we're always monitoring our engine instruments. The other thing is the engine might start to run rough. Both of those could be indications that we've got a loose fuel line inside the cowling, and of course spraying fuel over a hot engine is certain to lead to possible combustion. So we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye out and we know what that could possibly be. The second thing we might have too is maybe we got a cracked cylinder, which might be something where the engine's running really rough and it's starting to leak oil. If that were the case, of course, oil could also ignite, and in either case, the oil, you might see some black smoke coming out from under the cowling, and that could be an indication that the oil is ignited, or that might be what's going on. And in the case of the fuel spraying, you might see something like an orange or reddish flame from that. That's kind of how the avgas would burn. So if we see these indications, hopefully we catch them before that and we don't have to go to the full fire part. Maybe we can stop it beforehand. So that's where we want to start our procedures. So for the procedures, of course, we want to have these memorized and then back them up with a checklist as able. And so as you can imagine, get that fuel shut off. So we go down, fuel, in this case, fuel shut-off valve is off, or maybe you've got a fuel selector that you would just turned off. I will pull the mixture all the way out, the throttle all the way out. If you have a fuel pump, make sure that is turned off, and the master switch and ignition both off. The other part we want to do is we want to make sure the flame doesn't come into the cabin in here. We don't want that to happen, so we want to close up the vents. In the case of this Cessna 172, we've got vents on either side, both sort of midway and up top near the edge of the window for passenger and pilot, and we have a cabin air control that we'd want to turn off as well. So the last thing we want to do is give air to the fire. Now, if we had smoke, that's something we would need to consider. The first thing we want to do is get that fire out, and then we might want to think about opening the vents back up to get rid of the smoke. But there's indications, and actually there's just considerations we'd want to think about there, which possibly could be that it won't vent it properly or could feed the fire. So once we've done all those procedures, we back it up with our checklist, and we just want to double check. Again, if we have time, that's why these things need to be memorized. So mixture of full lean idle cutoff, fuel shut-off valve is off, master switch is off, cabin heat and air is off, and then increase the airspeed. So if we need to, and we do think we've got flames, we need to get the airplane down as fast as possible for a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to see if we can maybe extinguish the flames by that increased airflow. The second thing is, if the actual engine were on fire, we could end up with structural damage or structural failure. And so we want to get the airplane down into a landing as soon as possible. So, of course, as we're always doing when we're flying, is we're always keeping an eye out for a good landing field, because maybe there's not an airport nearby that we could get to, and we don't want to get drawn into the trap of potentially trying to stretch it or trying to use the improperly running engine to get us to an airfield and then have structural failure on the way. So that said, I'm just going to simulate that right now. I've already done that checklist in my flow. I would just pull the throttle, in this case to idle, and then I'm going to start a descending turn. I'm going to put the nose down, and in the 172, I'm looking for 100 knots of airspeed. And it's actually not quite as nose down as you might think, but probably steeper than you're used to. And I'm just going to keep circling around, looking for a field where I can go, and I need to be ready that I'm going to put this airplane down in the field. And my biggest concern is get it down before any potential engine failure, and then also being ready to make that transition as needed to a normal landing, off-field type of landing, if we can call that normal. And so, as always, the best thing we can do with these emergency procedures, and I'll say this for all of them, is practice them often and make sure that we're familiar, because that is going to make us a safer pilot.